You ever wanted revenge so bad you risked jail time with a dead possum? I was 17, humiliated by a so-called friend who tried to shame me into silence. But instead of crying in a corner, I found the perfect weapon rotting on the side of the road. You won't believe what happened next. When Matt moved to our small town, it was like a teen movie playing out in real life. New guy, guitar slung across his back, hair falling just right over one eye. He looked like trouble, but the kind your heart insists on chasing anyway. Music mostly, but also rebellion, also curiosity. Also that desperate teenage desire to be seen and understood. We started dating when I was a junior, and he was finishing up his senior year. I was 16, he was 17, the kind of age difference that feels like a canyon when you're young, even if it's only 12 months, but we didn't care. Our love was awkward, a little messy, and kind of perfect in its own dorky way. We wrote dumb songs together, snuck out to lay under the stars, and argued about who got to pick the playlist during drives. There were moments it felt like we were the only two real people in a world full of NPCs, just running background noise. Matt was my first everything, first kiss, first real partner, first person I trusted enough to see me beyond the filters. And yeah, losing my virginity wasn't some cinematic experience. It was clumsy and weird and full of nervous laughter. But what mattered more was the talk we had before it happened. Boundaries, privacy, respect. We swore to each other. This moment stays between us. No bragging, no stories, just ours. I thought that meant something. Matt understood that. He didn't push. He never judged. He just let me breathe. But not everyone was like Matt. There was this guy, Griffin, also a senior. We weren't close, but he was part of the same music crowd. Choir, orchestra, band. He was everywhere. And if Matt was the guy who made rebellion look cool, Griffin was the one who made religion feel like a weapon. He carried a Bible like a sword and knew how to smile while cutting you with it. His faith wasn't quiet. It was a performance. Charisma cloaked in superiority. My parents were moving us out of state before my senior year even began. I was already grieving a relationship that hadn't even ended yet. But just before everything was supposed to end gently, it exploded in a way I never saw coming. A betrayal so intimate it made my skin crawl. And Griffin, he lit the match. But he had no idea that in trying to shame me, he'd just handed me the perfect reason to burn his world down. Griffin was the kind of guy who fooled adults and scared teenagers. Teachers loved him. Straight a student, always raised his hand, volunteered at school events. Quoted scripture with ease. To the untrained eye, he looked like every parent's dream. Polite, respectful, God-fearing. But underneath the carefully curated Jesus boy aesthetic was something much darker. A need to control, to dominate, to manipulate. And he was very good at it. At school, Griffin wasn't just a presence. He was a performance. Always standing a little taller than everyone else, like God himself had placed him in our music room to guide the lost. And in his eyes, we were all lost. Especially me. Maybe it was because I had one foot out of the church. Maybe it was because Matt refused to bow to anyone, especially someone like Griffin. Or maybe, and this is the one that stuck with me, Griffin couldn't handle that someone like me had something he didn't. Love. Real love. The kind that doesn't need approval, doesn't follow rules, and sure as hell doesn't care what a sanctimonious hypocrite thinks. Still, I was polite. I smiled when Griffin invited me to youth group for the 10th time. I nodded when he handed out mini Bibles in the hallway like they were party favors. I let him believe his voice mattered to me because, honestly, I was still learning to say no. I was still. Matt saw through him instantly. He didn't play polite. When Griffin cornered him about his lack of faith, Matt just shrugged and said, God and I aren't on speaking terms, which shut Griffin up for a solid week. But me? I still danced around confrontation. I didn't want to be rude, even to someone who clearly didn't care how uncomfortable he made me. That's the thing about girls raised in the church. We retrain to make our discomfort seem like a misunderstanding. As if our instincts can't be trusted. As if giving someone the benefit of the doubt is more important than protecting ourselves. You've got such a great voice, he once told me. It's a shame you're not using it for God. That one stung. I started to feel boxed in, watched, Like Griffin was keeping tabs on me, just waiting for proof that I was the sinner he already believed I was. And I guess he found what he needed the day he got a hold of my journal. I still remember the exact notebook, cheap spiral bound, no labels, just lined pages that held everything I was too scared to say out loud. I'd written about Matt, about how he made me feel safe, about what we did together. Nothing graphic, nothing dirty, just raw. Unfiltered truth from a girl trying to make sense of her own body and feelings. I wrote it because I needed to survive. Because if I didn't pour those thoughts onto paper, I was afraid I'd pour them into a scream no one would hear, and Griffin read it. I didn't find out right away. It started with whispers, side eyes, friends suddenly going cold. Then came the names, slut, whore, godless, words that hit harder than any fist. And when I finally traced it back to him, when I realized Griffin had gone through my things stolen my journal. I remember the day like it was branded into my memory, bright, humid, with a kind of stillness in the air that always meant a storm was coming. Except this one wasn't made of thunder or rain, it was made of whispers, and they were all about me. It started during third period. I walked into class and could feel something was off. People glanced at me, then quickly looked away. A couple of girls near the window leaned in and started whispering behind their hands, laughing, not the usual kind. The sharp kind, the kind that cuts. By lunch, it was a full-on tidal wave. I sat down at our usual table. Matt, Henry, a couple other friends, and everyone except them suddenly had something very important to do somewhere else. Phones were out, people were texting furiously, and my stomach sank deeper with every second. I turned to Matt, who looked just as confused as I did, and said, "What's going on?" He didn't know, yet. It wasn't until the end of the day that I found out. Henry came up to me looking pale and nervous, glancing over his shoulder like he was about to leak national secrets. "Hey, I think you should know Griffin has your journal." I blinked. "What?" He just sat with me in the wreckage, reminding me I wasn't alone. But even his comfort couldn't drown out the noise at school the next day. It was like I'd become a new person overnight, not in a good way. I wasn't Op the singer anymore, or the girl with the funny laugh, or the one who always brought extra snacks to rehearsal. I was the girl from the journal. The girl who had sex, the girl who talked about it. The girl who apparently didn't know her place. Everywhere I went, it followed me. The whispers, the side comments, the dirty looks. Someone slipped a Bible tract into my locker. Another person scrawled "whore" on my practice folder and stuck it back into my cubby. I reported it. Nothing happened. The teacher gave me a look like, "What did you expect?" Matt, of course, didn't get it nearly as bad. A few jokes, a couple guys trying to high-five him, which he shut down immediately, but mostly, people just shrugged. Typical guy, but me? I was walking shame, apparently. I tried to stay quiet, keep my head down. Just get through the last few weeks before moving away. But each day chipped away at me a little more. My world got smaller. My voice, quieter. My presence, dimmer. And Griffin? Oh, Griffin walked around like he'd done the Lord's work. I overheard him telling someone, I just wanted to show her the consequences of straying from God's path. He said it like a hero. Like violating my privacy, humiliating me, and destroying my peace was some act of divine righteousness. That's when it changed. When the pain started to curdle into something stronger. Something hot and sharp and righteous in its own way. Rage. I didn't want to forgive. I didn't want to turn the other cheek. I didn't want to be the better person. I wanted to ruin him. It started small, fantasy-level revenge thoughts. Like, what if I swapped his communion wafers for dog treats? Or signed him up for every atheist mailing list in the country? But none of it was satisfying. None of it matched the scale of what he took from me. It wasn't until a few days later, when I was sitting on my back porch with Matt and Henry, that the opportunity quite literally crawled into my life. Well, rotted, actually. We were mid-conversation, mostly just venting about the whole thing, when I glanced at the road behind our house. Easy to avoid if you kept low. We planned it like a military op. We'd go at night, dressed in black, masks on. We debagged the possum in layers, thick trash bags inside a duffel so no fluids leaked in the car. Gloves, of course. And just in case, Matt brought a tarp to put down in the trunk. The real challenge was placement. Griffin's truck was tall, custom lift, big tires, the kind you'd expect in a country music video. There was no way he'd see something on the roof unless he specifically looked. Which he wouldn't. His morning routine was predictable. He'd hop in, crank the radio, and drive off without a second glance. The morning after Operation SDP, I walked into school with a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. It was almost surreal, like the storm had passed, and I was just standing in the eerie quiet before the thunder rolled. Except this time, I was the storm. I saw Griffin that morning. He was across the parking lot, grinning, sipping an energy drink, chatting with someone near his truck like the king of the school. Totally unaware. Totally oblivious. He hadn't noticed anything yet. The possum, bloated and gagging with decay, was still strapped to the roof like a time bomb ticking under the southern sun. God bless his ego. Griffin never looked up. The best part? His windows were cracked open, probably to help with the heat. Ironically, that little detail sealed his fate. The slow drip of possum juice seeping through the roof and down the sides of the truck. That was the beginning of his end. Classes that day moved slower than molasses. I couldn't focus. My heart was in my throat. My hands tingled with anticipation. I watched the clock like a sniper waiting for the perfect shot. And then the final bell rang. I moved fast. Met Matt and Henry just outside the music building. We had staked out the perfect observation point, a slight hill overlooking the senior lot. Just close enough to see everything, far enough to blend in. The second we hit the lot, it hit us, the smell. It was instant. A thick, suffocating wall of rot and decay that rolled across the parking lot like a curse. Students stopped mid-step, covered their mouths, started gagging. A couple kids ran back inside. One girl screamed, "Oh my God, what is that?" It was glorious. Griffin, of course, was still clueless. He walked toward his truck, slowing as he approached the smell, nose crinkling. I saw his head turn, eyes scanning for the source. But it wasn't until he got right up to his door that the full horror hit him. He froze, then slowly, finally, looked up. We couldn't hear him, but we saw it, that perfect moment when his brain processed what was strapped to his truck. The bulging plastic, the dark, slick stain trailing down the sides, the unmistakable shape of something once alive. He stumbled back, hands on knees. Retched violently. Tried to stagger away, but the smell followed him like a demon. Students had started gathering now, standing in small, horrified clusters. Phones were out, pictures were being taken. Videos recorded. One guy shouted, "Yo, what is that on Griffin's truck?" The whole lot erupted in chaos, and then the moment. It was hot. That truck had been baking in the sun for hours. The possum, already bloated beyond nature's limits, chose that very second to explode, a sound like a wet balloon popping, followed by screaming. And then came the fear. Word spread that Matt and I had beef with Griffin, that we'd been humiliated, that maybe this wasn't just a prank, maybe it was payback. No one had proof. No one saw us, but the Whisper Network was alive and well. And suddenly, the people who had once called me names, they weren't laughing anymore. They were nervous. I walked down the hall with my head up, for the first time in weeks, and people parted like the Red Sea. No more slurs, no more judgment, just quiet, cautious stares. I'd gone from shame to respected, or maybe feared, honestly. Either was fine with me. The best part? Griffin never said a word to me, not one. Not even a glare. He changed tables at lunch. Skipped school events if he knew I'd be there. Stopped inviting people to church. Whatever had been driving his self-righteous campaign. It died that day, along with his custom paint job and any remaining shred of dignity. And I wasn't done yet. By the next morning, the story had evolved from grotesque curiosity to full-blown legend. The kind of tale that students whispered between lockers like sacred gossip. The truck, the possum, the explosion. No one called it by its real name. There were just too many variations floating around. Some said it was a raccoon. Others claimed it was a cat. One guy swore it was a human baby pig. But they all agreed on one thing: Griffin's prized truck had been desecrated in a way no amount of soap or prayer could ever cleanse. He didn't come to school that morning. When the bell rang, his seat in AP government stayed empty. His spot in choir practice was silent. And for the first time in forever, Griffin didn't show up to lunch. Which meant the mystery and the rumors only grew. Because no one officially knew what had happened. The explosion hadn't been caught on video, just the aftermath. The gagging, the crying, the tow truck guy dry heaving while trying to hook the slime-covered beast to his rig. Those clips? Circulating fast. I overheard someone in third period say, "Dude, I heard it melted the interior." Another replied, "My cousin said his parents are talking about selling the whole thing for parts." But beneath the laughter and disbelief, there was something else brewing in the air, suspicion. Because the school might not have known how it happened, but plenty of people remembered the journal. And everyone knew Griffin had torched my reputation weeks earlier. And Matt? Matt had been fiercely loyal, the kind of guy who didn't raise his voice, but whose silence felt like a threat. The two of us together made people nervous. And then there was Henry, quiet, kind, always hanging around but never drawing attention. No one thought to connect him, which made him the perfect ghost. The administration, of course, had to do something. You don't get a biohazardous corpse explosion in your parking lot without sparking a school-wide meeting. So the next day, we were all called to an assembly. I sat in the back with Matt and Henry, arms crossed, face neutral. Principal Green stood on stage with that tight-lipped, trying to stay professional smile that said, "I have no idea what I'm doing." "Students," she began, "as many of you are aware, there was an unfortunate incident in the parking lot involving a student's vehicle. I want to be clear, this was not a prank. This was vandalism, serious vandalism. Potentially even criminal in nature. A few kids laughed. One guy fake coughed possum guts, and half the room cracked up." She scowled. "This isn't funny. Someone brought a dead animal onto school grounds and caused property damage. If you know anything about who may be responsible, come forward. Otherwise, the school will be working with law enforcement and the district to get to the bottom of this." It sounded serious, but to us, it was air. Because they had nothing. There were cameras, sure. But all they showed was Griffin pulling into the lot with the possum already on his roof. There was no footage of us in the woods. No images of us in all black, masks tight, carrying the biohazard bag like it was a cursed relic. No footprints, no digital trail. We were ghosts. Still, the heat was on. Matt got called to the office a few hours later. He kissed my hand before he left and just said, "Don't worry. I got this." Apparently, Griffin, his parents, and some man in a gray suit had shown up demanding justice. Word spread fast. People started treating me differently. It wasn't instant respect, more like cautious distance. Like they weren't sure if I'd really done it, but they really didn't want to find out the hard way. Girls who used to snicker behind my back started whispering to me, voices lowered. "Hey, are you okay?" Just so you know, I never believed what he said. "You're actually kind of a legend right now." Legend. That word stuck. Not because I wanted fame, but because it meant I'd rewritten the narrative. He'd been reduced to a memory, an overconfident boy who tried to shame a girl and got wrecked by karma, rot, and 3 very determined teenagers. But there was one more moment. One more piece of perfect poetry. Graduation. I wasn't walking, obviously. I was a junior. But I sat in the crowd cheering for my friends. Matt was there beside me, Henry too. We clapped for our classmates, watched as the seniors crossed the stage one by one. And then Griffin's name was called. He stepped onto the platform, stiff and robotic, like he knew all eyes were on him for the wrong reasons. His smile was forced. His handshake with the principal awkward, and as he descended the stairs, he looked out into the crowd. And our eyes met. I didn't plan it. It just happened. I raised my hands, made a little explosion motion with my fingers. And winked. His face paled, his step faltered, and that was it. The final note in the song of my revenge. A silent mic drop, years in the making, sealed with possum guts and poetic justice. You'd think after something as outrageous as a possum explosion, the story would eventually fade. But it didn't. If anything, the legend grew, mutated, expanded, took on a life of its own. Long after Griffin's truck had been towed, scrubbed, and eventually scrapped, people were still talking about it. And without proof, the truth became myth. I became the ghost in the story. The girl people whispered about but never accused out loud. Because what if the rumors were true? What if I was behind it? It was safer to smile and say nothing. At first, I didn't realize how far it had spread. I do walk into a room. Feel a shift, like people were suddenly standing up straighter, laughing quieter. A few juniors I didn't even know would glance at me and quickly turn away. One even muttered, "Dude, that's her," under his breath in the hallway. And I? That's her. Not the girl Griffin humiliated. But the possum girl. The first time I heard the phrase, I was in line at the vending machine. 2 underclassmen were whispering behind me. One said, "No, for real. She put a dead possum on some guy's car and it exploded." The other gasped, "Ooh, why?" And then the first one replied like it was obvious, because he was a dick. I was sitting in the music room alone, practicing a piece, just trying to clear my head, when Mr. Stanton, our choir director, walked in. He paused, looked at me for a long second, then said, "You're singing better lately." I blinked. "Thanks?" He nodded. "Confidence suits you." Then he left. It hit me then. People didn't need a confession. They already believed. And more than that, they respected it. Because revenge, especially the kind that leaves no fingerprints, does something to people. It forces them to rethink what they know, to question what's possible. And in high school, that possum might have died on the road, but it came back to life just long enough to deliver poetic justice. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's bloated, rancid, and unforgettable. Like this story? Smash that like button, subscribe, and tell me, what's your most savage revenge?